Libby's grandparents had just given a full one-on-one interview with Fox 59. I have no idea what they're going to say within this interview, but I am highly interested to hear what they say. I can promise this won't be a hit piece. I always try my best to remain respectful to all victims and victims' family members. All that being said, everything's alleged. Welcome to the point. Let's get to it.
Tomorrow marks 8 years since Libby German and Abby Williams were on a hike in Delphi. And this was during a day off from school. Made national headlines, and their families waited years for justice.
They did. They waited a long time.
A jury delivered a verdict. That happened just last November. And tonight, only on Fox 59, we're hearing from Libby's grandparents in an exclusive interview.
It comes just days after our Rafael Sanchez sat down with Mike and Becky Patty for the first time since the verdict and sentence were handed down. They talked about the case, the leaked photos, and the pending appeals from Richard Allen.
All things we want to know about.
Abby Williams and Libby German should be finishing up their senior year in college with eyes on graduation. But that was among the many milestones stolen from their families.
2 girls lost their lives, and a monster took it.
Families who say they found justice at the Carroll County Courthouse. A jury convicted Richard Allen in November 2024. Allen was sentenced to 130 years in state prison for teenage girls. Their bodies found on February the 14th, Valentine's Day, 2017, not far from the old Monon High Bridge in Delphi.
Are you at peace with the verdict, or do you struggle with the verdict?
No, the verdict was fair and just. I mean, that is our justice system.
I gotta say, while I remain respectful, that verdict was not fair. That is not how our justice system is supposed to work. When a criminal defendant gets charged with a crime, they have rights. They have the right to defend themselves. They have the right to a valid third-party defense. These things were denied from Richard Allen, and not only were these things denied, Judge Gold tried to have his defense team thrown off the case. I mean, we can give a little bit of grace to their words, given who they are and what they've been through, and the type of people that have been feeding them information. But I will 100% disagree that this was a fair trial.
And it worked just as intended.
It was certainly how it was intended.
It won't bring the girls back. You know, that'll never happen, but at least he can't do this to somebody else's family.
Since 2017, I've sat with Libby's grandparents many times in this kitchen area to talk about the girls. This was our first time together since the trial, without a court-imposed gag order.
Was there a piece of evidence as you saw the jury, as the courtroom was full of people, that you thought, or pieces of testimony or evidence that you said, we know in our heart what we know, but this is it. This is the evidence that jury of 12 and the alternates will say it has to be guilty.
And there was too many factors that all pointed directly to Richard Allen.
One of the things that made me go, oh, was during the interview when his wife came in and said to him, but you said you weren't on the bridge.
Okay, so if one of their key factors is Richard Allen supposedly not telling his wife that he was on the bridge when he actually was, disregarding the fact that he wasn't on the bridge during the time of this attack. But let's run with that for just a second. Didn't Ron Logan tell law enforcement one thing but actually do another? And the same thing for Fields. There's a lot of individuals within this particular story that are now on the outskirts because they weren't allowed in at trial that had changes in their alibi. They had told law enforcement one thing but did something else. Or they told somebody one story when they were actually doing something else. If Richard Allen supposedly lied, and that's what you consider to be one of the key pieces of evidence, that's fine. Ron Logan wasn't telling the truth, and neither was Elvis Fields. I mean, there's a whole lot of other stuff that should have came in at trial, and the jury should have been the finder of fact here. That's just how I'm seeing it. Now, if you see it differently, you can let me know down in the comments below.
They believe their client, in their word, is innocent and should not be in state prison. It is their belief that the wrong person is in custody.
Let's jump from odinism to now Ron Logan. The defense was 100% convinced this is odinism. Again, read their actions, not their words. They're just trying to find something to stick against the wall. Richard could put a stop to this.
And here we go with this blame shifting. Well, if Richard Allen could put a stop to all this, he could confess to these crimes and we could move on. As if the man doesn't have the right to declare that he's innocent. As if his defense team can't make a case that he's innocent. The concerning factor here isn't that the defense is trying to throw things against the wall. I am pretty sure they believe that that is what they're doing because of the individuals that are feeding them information. The concerning thing here is there's more than one possible suspect here. The concerning thing here is we have all heard, at least through somebody else, all the evidence the state says they have against Richard Allen saying he was the one who committed this crime. But if you go back and look at all these stories and social media coverage on this particular story, the number of people who believe he is innocent or at the very least believe he deserves a fair trial has just skyrocketed significantly, with me being one of them. So we need to stop like this trial gave all the answers. We need to stop acting like this trial provided all the facts. Do I believe Richard Allen committed this crime? No, I don't. Primarily because he never said he was on the bridge during the time of this attack. And he said he saw 3 girls on the trail. They pulled 2 on the stand. And those 2 on the stand said they saw a bridge guy, but their description of bridge guy didn't match Richard Allen. There was somebody else on the trail that day. And everybody needs to stop saying, well, if Richard Allen was on the trail that day, why didn't he see bridge guy? When you look at the description of bridge guy, it looks nothing like Richard Allen. I'm sorry, that's just my own personal opinion. I feel like everybody is saying that's Richard Allen on the bridge and he's the guy in the bridge guy video just because law enforcement is saying that's Richard Allen. Respectfully, I just gotta disagree.
The Patties gave high marks to Judge Fran Gull for keeping the trial on track.
She stood firm.
And praised law enforcement for cracking the case.
They were so highly committed to this.
They were absolutely 100% highly committed to this because there was an election coming up. Now, does that necessarily mean there was some sort of conspiracy? Not necessarily. I believe law enforcement botched this investigation. I believe whatever evidence tied the real suspect to this crime has long been destroyed. And I feel like Nick Mcleland needed somebody and he couldn't go back to Ron Logan. Ron Logan being a potential suspect is not the defense throwing things against the law, and neither was odinism. Those were all things that came from a law enforcement investigation. And to say Judge Gull kept things on track when she was the one who set this off course is just absurd in my own unprofessional opinion. It was Judge Gull that said these attorneys need to be thrown off the case. It was Judge Gull's actions that led this thing to go to the state Supreme Court, where the state Supreme Court said, Judge, you have no place to do this. These individuals are going back on this case. And they told the attorneys, hey, look, if you don't like the judge, stop filing these motions, build a record, and we'll see where it goes from there. But anyways.
During the trial, they say they found comfort when jurors asked questions. It signaled to them that they were paying attention.
Now, how were the jurors paying attention? That is a huge question for me, at least based off that one juror interview. Because the key piece of evidence the state says ties Richard Allen to the crime is that unspent round found at the crime scene. But it seems like at least one juror did not put a lot of stock into what the state's ballistic expert said. And by the way, she said her science was subjective and she said she couldn't exclude other weapons tested. And I am wondering if one of those weapons tested were Brad Weber's, or was it Ron Logan's, or was it one of these potential odinist suspects? When you have an expert who is saying this one key piece of evidence could possibly be tied to other individuals, how is it a key piece of evidence? I mean, if I'm wrong, but that's just how I'm seeing it, and it doesn't make sense.
The Patties are critical of Allen's legal defense team, not for doing their job, but for failing to protect key evidence that ended up on the internet.
And Attorney Baldwin called the removal of the crime scene photos from his office, his words, a dramatic mistake that had nothing to do with the leak.
His mistake that we live with forever, unless he could get every single photo off the internet, and that's impossible. So, yeah, it's definitely a dramatic mistake. He may not have shared those photos, but he left them unattended.
They were his responsibility.
Yes, they were his responsibility. He owned up to his portion of responsibility by shoring up that particular office. But it is not a fair take to say he was doing something careless. When you listen to lawyers who talk on YouTube or lawyers who are interviewed on national TV, they will often say that they have some type of war room set up. They will often say that they don't really secure that thing because only a limited number of people go in and out of that room. And they trust their staff, they hire their staff, they work with them day in, day out. But to put the blame solely on him is not necessarily fair. One individual was found responsible, he acted on his own, and he actually self-passed away after he was interviewed by Jerry Holman. But let's not forget the state was leaking stuff as well. There were reports coming out from very early on in this investigation, all the way up to the trial, that had a lot of us wondering if all this stuff is sealed, who's leaking all this information, because it isn't necessarily just the defense. Yes, autopsy pictures were leaked. It was tragic, it was heartbreaking, and it shouldn't have happened, but it did. But to demonize these individuals simply because you want to demonize these individuals isn't necessarily fair. There are plenty of systems put in place to punish attorneys when they do wrong, and to my knowledge, nothing has happened to Baldwin, Rozzi, or Auger, which leads me to believe they didn't do something necessarily wrong.
Do you believe that that legal team, through the normal course of what the Supreme Court does, should they face any discipline for their action?
I would leave that up to the courts and the professional.
For them, 2025
And nothing
is
has
about
happened.
taking back their lives.
How are you preparing for the appeals journey?
I'm not. Just like I kind of just turned it over to God and said, I have to trust that the people will see, that they will see the truth.
I 100% agree with what she said. Turn this thing over to God so that people may see the truth. I mean, we are well past the trial here and we are still left with more questions than answers. What does that tell everybody? What should that tell everybody? How anybody can sit there and say they 100% got all the answers to the questions they had at this particular trial just doesn't make sense to me. Now, if it makes sense to you, you can let me know down in the comments below.
He will always be guilty to me, no matter what kind of appeal.
Their focus will not be on any courtroom, but cradling the needs of their family and sharing the love of two girls who did not get a chance to live their lives. In Delphi, Rafael Sanchez, Fox 59.
And one of the many tragedies within this story is Libby and Abby are not being talked about the way they should be talked about because of how the state acted before this trial. But for him to say, regardless of what happens in this appeal, Richard Allen will always be guilty just doesn't necessarily make sense. I understand you want justice for your granddaughter. We all want justice for your granddaughter. But if Richard Allen somehow gets another trial, which I hope he does, at the very least I believe he does, and he is found not guilty in that particular trial, that means he didn't commit this crime. I mean, whether he's innocent, factually innocent, found not guilty, whatever you want to say, that's not on him, that's on the state. That's why we should have expectations of our law enforcement officers. That's why we should have expectations from our prosecutors. If Richard Allen is found not guilty of this crime, that means he is not guilty. But I understand where he's coming from, and I'm not going to dig on him too much. But if you enjoyed this and more fair, open conversation, maybe check one of these videos out. Y'all be safe now.